Hello, hello. Welcome back to Relatively Speaking with my brother, Jamie. He's going to give us some insight today on down payments. And I think there's quite a few misconceptions out there about down payments. So I'm hoping that you can give us maybe the top three and let's talk about it.
I mean, it'll be hard to narrow down to just three, but all right, let's talk about the top three ones. So I think the biggest misconception, right? Like everyone knows when you buy your first house, you can do it with as little as 5% down, right?
Yes.
Now, when it comes to your second home, right, you can no longer do that, right?
Yes, correct.
Right, wrong. So this is probably the biggest one. I mean, that was hilarious setup on that side. So I think what people have the erroneous misconception, it's easy to think, hard to say, by the way, but is because when you buy your first home, you can do the first time home buyer RSP, you get your first time home buyer your land transfer tax credit. So they assume that once I've done that it all bundles in. But you can buy your second home, 2000th home and still do 5% down as long as it's under 500K. Of course, there is that sliding scale. So, and then that same thing also applies like, okay, well, that's my primary home, right? If you're buying a cottage or a second home, then I must have to do 20% down, right? So even on a second home, so if you're buying, again, like a cottage or a vacation home or anything like that, still can look at as little as 5% down. So I think that's probably number one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit there about 5% as long as it's under 500,000. Yes. So there is a sliding scale. We've talked a bit about that before. So what does that mean? It means that up to 500,000 is 5%. Anything above 500 is 10%. And I think that's where the error comes from is people are like, oh, anything above 500 grand has to be 10%. And then we assume it's the whole amount. Mm-hmm. So it's only 10% on the amount that is above the 500. So let's do some fun with math. You know, I'm a math nerd. So 800 grand place. The first 500 is 5%. So 25 grand. That other 300,000 above is only 10%, so 30. So total is 55. Okay. It's not 10% of the 800, that would be 80.
Right.
So that's another big misconception. I mean, people just don't quite know how to read the fine print. But yeah, I mean, that's gonna be your first, second home, cottage home, anything like that. All right. So
so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's your primary or your secondary or your 10th, because you're an investor and it all depends on the price of the property.
Now, that's a key point there because you said the word investor. We've all been using the word second home. Okay. Why is that key? So if it is a rental, meaning if we have to use rental income to qualify on this property that you're buying, and it's a rental home, then it is 20% down. I'm glad you brought that up because short-term rentals, if it's going to be Airbnb or such like that, we don't want to say those things. All right. So banks will not lend on short-term rentals. We're always going to say it's a long-term rental. And if you're like, I don't have a lease available for, long-term, like how am I going to use income? We can use what's called market rents. So we'll get someone like you, Tara, or an appraiser to tell us what it would rent out as a long-term rental. All right. So don't ever put those magical acronyms on.
Steer clear of that in the listing as well.
Mm-hmm. Your lips to God's ears. Yes, absolutely. So the last one I think we want to talk about, because we have been talking about rentals, is a lot of people are like, oh, I'm dying to buy a rental. I want to be able to do that, but like I'm still saving up down payment. And they've got a house that they've owned for 10, 20 years. They bought it for 300. It's worth like $1 million. The mortgage is 200. You're sitting on. My dad used to always joke around. We're like, oh, I'm cash poor. I'm asset rich. You got money. It's just in your house. And we can use equity out of your house. We can either refinance it, add it to your mortgage, or we can put on a secured line of credit. Lots of people love to call them HELOCs, home equity line of credit. If you're like, oh, that's great. Surely I have to just wait till my mortgage comes up for renewal, right? No, not at all. So we can look to blend with your existing mortgage so you don't have to pay a breakage fee, you don't have to lose the existing rate, or keep your mortgage and we can add on a line of credit. All right. So how's that for three? I think we hit 3, maybe 5.
We put a few others in there, I think, as we're chatting.
We get extra bonus stars. Yeah, just lots of great information. I think there's just, to your point, there's so much misinformation.
Yes.
If the person you're talking to doesn't have a designation of mortgage agent, mortgage broker, or mortgage wizard,
Yes.
Just maybe thank them, but shake their hand, and go move and speak with an expert.
I think the key is just to make sure, and that's for me as well, and for any realtor out there, is to make sure that the person you're working with has spoken to a broker in any capacity, because that they're the ones who are going to give you those answers and make sure that you're on track. So
I think that's a great point. And even if you go to your bank and your bank says, no, we can't do a home equity line of credit, that doesn't mean no forever. And it doesn't probably mean no for every single lender.
Right.
Good potential that person might not be the longest, most experienced person. Maybe they're not underwriting it properly, or maybe they're just not looking at other options. So don't always take their word for it as well.
Okay, then I will make sure my clients are aware. Thank you very much for giving us some insight into down payments.
My pleasure, sis.
Okay. See you later.
Not for now. Mortgage Nerd out.